In this video, we'll go over some parameters to add more variation to our mutations. To see the effects of the mutation node more clearly, I'll just clear off some areas of the workspace and strictly focus on the 2D view. First, we'll run the mutation on our 1K sample to an output of 2K. Right away, we'll notice the repetition of patterns throughout the final input. We can address this by manipulating the jitter and detail parameters for mutation. Because we'll be going through a lot of parameters, let's enable preview mode to quickly see what each function does. What this will do is create a lower res preview of our adjustments. The jitter parameters dictate how much variance happens when the samples get tiled around. They correlate directly to the detail sliders below. Let's go ahead and just dial up some of the detail sliders. Each of these represent which parts of the image the jitter gets applied onto. So harsh applies jitter to larger parts of the image, and sharp applies to finer details of the image. Just adjusting some of these values will give you a much more varied output, as we're not seeing the repeating pattern we saw first. Now, if we push the detail sliders at 100 and pull down the jitter amounts to 0, the detail sliders now become null since they depend on the jitter amount. The result is the sample tiled across without any offsetting, resulting in a very repetitive looking output. So applying jitter in combination with the detail sliders is one way to break up repetition. Let's execute the node to get out of preview mode and see our final result. For further variation, we can also add scale and orientation to the mix. Let's just enable preview mode again and scroll down and enable the scale and orientation section. The feature size represents which area of the image will receive scale and orientation values. The larger the number, the larger features will receive the scale and orientation parameters. If we lower the number, then rotation will be applied to finer features. When used with a rotation level of 100, we are rotating the samples that are being tiled across the image. We can control the amount of rotation by adjusting the rotation level. And if we want to, we can enable control rotation, which gives us more control. I'll just change the increments to 45. Now each patch will only be rotated by the 45-degree increments. Lastly, we can add randomized scale, which will add scale variance to the samples. Bringing this value to 100 and executing, we can see some very large patches and then some very small ones. So using a combination of scale and orientation along with the jitter and detail sliders can give you lots of flexibility to remix existing data. Don't forget to re-execute if you're in preview mode for the final result. Because Mutation has a lot of controls and parameters, I would recommend using a debug texture such as this and playing with the sliders to get a real understanding of how they work. While working in preview mode, I can adjust the jitter and orientation values to get a better sense of what each parameter does.